Christian Münzner of Eternity's End, and you're listening to The Ritual with Lady Death on Metal Messiah Radio.
This is Lady Death. I had the chance to have Christian Münzner a few months ago in my show to talk about his music career and his current news. Today, Christian is joining us again to talk more about his latest project, Eternity's End, and their debut album, The Fire Within. First of all, let me thank you for giving us a bit of your time, Christian, and welcome back to my show.
It's my pleasure. Good to be here.
So, Christian, you teamed up with Ian Perry, Jimmy Pitts, and your bandmates of Alkaloid, both Hannes Grossman and Linus Klausnitzer, to form a progressive power metal band, Eternity's End, back in 2014. As we all know, you are known of being a phenomenal technical progressive death metal guitarist. How come you formed a progressive power metal band?
Well, the reason I did this is that this is, in fact, the style of music that I always wanted to play. This is basically what my musical background is. I'm much more of a power metal, progressive metal kind of guy, classic metal guy who prefers clean vocals instead of a death metal guy, a pure death metal guy. The thing is, I ended up in death metal, and I've always wanted to make the kind of band like Eternity's End, like since the late 90s.
Yeah.
But it was always very difficult, to find, especially to find a good vocalist for that kind of style. And what happened was I was looking for a good band to join in the 90s in the area where I lived, so I ended up in playing with Defeated Sanity because those guys were the best musicians in our hometown.
Yeah.
And then I grew to like death metal a lot more, and I got more into it, and they introduced me to a lot of stuff. Still power metal, prog metal and classic metal remained my first love musically. And then I heard Necrophagist, which was basically, to me, the closest thing to power metal or neoclassical metal that I found in death metal, right? And I joined them when they were looking for a new guitar player, and because of the success of the album Epitaph, I basically kind of got stuck in that scene, because then I got contacted by other musicians and other bands from that genre. And that's why people have the impression that I'm mainly a death metal guy who's playing power metal now, but the reality was quite the opposite. I was always like a power metal, progressive metal guy playing death metal, and for so many years I had this vision to make this album. It was my dream come true, and I think 3 years or so ago, I mentioned to a friend of mine, I would love to be in a band like that, and he said, well, don't just talk about it, just do it if that's what you want to do, right? And I thought, well, he's right. So I basically sat down and wrote a couple of songs, and then got the musicians together and formed it, and this is basically a dream come true, and for me personally, it feels like the best thing I've done so far.
That's nice. Finally, your debut album, The Fire Within, is out. It was released back on March 25th through Power Prog Records. How can you describe your music for the ones who didn't check the album yet?
Well, it's basically, it's not something, I think, that is really reinventing the wheel, right? So if you like classic metal and power metal and neoclassical, stuff with lots of virtuoso guitar playing, catchy choruses, right, dark fantasy inspired lyrics, that kind of thing, I think you will dig this album. What sets it apart, I think, from the majority of other bands in its style is that we're a lot heavier than almost any other band I can think of in that genre. We put a lot of focus on speed and also on technicality in the music, on the over-the-top element. This is very important for our sound. And a lot of emphasis on heavy riffing and rhythm work, right? Something that I feel lacks in power metal. especially these days for the most part, because power metal has become a bit of a swear word, because very often to many people it's just like pop music with power chords.
Yeah.
And we try to have the same energy and aggression in our music and technicality that we're known from death metal stuff that we play. And this is actually also something that people pointed out in the reviews, for example, that they like this about the record, that there's a lot of focus on heaviness and speed and the over-the-top element, combining that with the more traditional elements, right, with the epic melodies and the catchy choruses and stuff that's actually quite easy to get, which people know from power metal in general, right? But I think, especially in terms of the heaviness and the aggression, we're quite different from other bands in that genre.
Yeah. So the album contains 10 tracks. It was hard for me to pick the best track. But may I ask you, which track would you recommend for the people to listen for the first time and why?
It's a good question. My personal favorite track on the album is the song Demon Blade.
Yeah.
I think it has the most attitude and straightforward drive, and basically combines all the elements. It has the big choirs and it has dark fantasy-inspired lyrics, a lot of virtuoso guitar playing, really, really heavy riffing, like some of the fastest double bass playing you probably ever heard in power metal.
Yeah.
Or maybe the opener, The Fire Within, like the title track.
Yeah.
I think it also combines everything that every element that this band stands for, I think. So one of those two songs, I guess, will give the listener who listens to the album for the first, or to the music for the first time, the best impression of what we actually want to do and what we sound like. Another favorite track of mine is a song called The Dark Tower, which is the epic track on the album, an 8-minute track.
Yeah.
But it does not really represent the general direction that we do, because it's a lot slower and moody than the usual stuff that we do. So I think to get a good first picture, I would recommend the title track or Demon Blade.
Alright. One day after the official release, the album became the top-selling album in category Power Metal on Bandcamp. This is amazing. I mean, did you ever imagine that Eternity's Ends will achieve this success?
Honestly, no, because for two reasons. I mean, one is that this style of music is not really popular or that popular anymore if you compare it to what it was like 15 years ago or something like that. Kids nowadays know they're all about blast beats and chanty rhythms and death metal vocals, and we basically do none of that. And I also know that the majority of fans of my previous music, they're mainly into the tech death, the death metal kind of thing. Very often people who like that stuff are not too open-minded towards more old school genres of music. So I didn't really expect that, but and it's also the case. What I heard from some fans who like to detect that stuff, that it's not really their thing, that they appreciate it. It's well done, but it's not really what they would listen to. But I feel that there's a new fan base of people who were not familiar with my stuff before.
Yeah.
And really like it. And I never expected that the album would be so well received. We got so many great reviews. There's so many, like 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 reviews, or so the majority of reviews has also been really overwhelming. And it basically was, like you said, the top selling album in the category power metal for a couple of weeks. It was in the top 100 of all metal releases on Bandcamp in terms of sales figures for about almost a month now.
Yeah.
So I'm quite overwhelmed by that. And I also heard from some other people, I think, I remember you told me that you basically don't listen to power metal that much, but that you really love the album, and I heard that from a couple of other people too, right? Who
yeah, exactly.
Into heavier stuff. And this is also really, really flattering, right? That people whose tastes are actually a little bit different can also like get into it and appreciate it that much. So this is definitely, it's received a lot better than I ever expected, because, when I first did that thing, it was mainly I did this album for myself, I think, right, to make a dream come true and realize my own dream with that. And I mean, it's a very good feeling to hear that people actually like it and get into it and appreciate what we're doing with this record. So I'm really happy.
Black
Eternity's End, and you're listening to The Ritual with Lady Death on Metal Messiah Radio.
So the most common thing in your songs was the guitar and keyboard solos played alternately. Did you come up with the entire solo, or Jimmy played some parts of it on keyboards, or you composed the solos both apart?
No, basically Jimmy does his own solos. They were not pre-composed, right? I basically just write the chord progression or the riff, and then I give the song to him, and I go crazy with it and do whatever you like. And he improvised a lot of the solos, actually, right? Yeah. So the only thing that I arranged there was the spots where his solos would be. And I also don't really compose my solos. It's more that I sit down to record and I improvise. I keep the best ideas and replay until I'm really happy with it. And I guess Jimmy does the same. So because it was very important to me that when Jimmy plays solo, that it's his own unique voice, right? And it is not something that I pre-composed and just have him perform. So he basically wrote or improvised basically his own solos. The only thing that we do that was pre-composed in terms of soloing is where we play parts in unisono, right? So like the harmonized sections, or where there's a couple of sections where I do arpeggios or neoclassical passages that he basically doubles on the harpsichord. Yeah. And I mean, those songs, of course, I wrote before and he just played them. Yeah. But with the solos, you had the complete freedom to do whatever you wanted, because it was very important to me that in the soloing, and he put his own stamp on the music, and he does his own style, because I'm such a big fan of his style, right? And when it comes to writing keyboard solos, he is a lot better with it than I am.
Yeah. So how did that recording process go? You faced any difficulty?
In fact, the recording process itself went quite easy. I mean, what I did was I demoed all the tracks, and on the demos I already tried to make sure I recorded the guitars like really clean and well, so I could actually use a lot of it for the actual album recordings later on. Like a lot of the tracks that ended up being in the album were already on the demos. I just doubled them. This time was the first time I recorded 4 rhythm guitars, so that was a lot of work to get everything accurate, especially if you have like songs like Münzner, where you have those really fast legato lines, and like doubling that 4 times and having it sound like one guitar. That was a little bit challenging. Yeah. And it was also challenging to find the right musicians for it, because I mean, I was trying out a couple of different drummers, and many had either difficulties with some of the tempos, because a lot of the stuff is a lot faster than what the average power metal drummer play in their music. So and looking for the musicians, because the lineup that's on the album was not the original intended first lineup, but in the end I just figured I work so well with those musicians, and they're so reliable with everything. So Hannes basically recorded the drums within 5 days, and Jimmy recorded all his solos within a week, and Ian was really quick with the vocals. What was a little bit difficult then was later on, when everything was recorded, everyone recorded at his own studio at home. Yeah. And then I went to Sweden for the mix and to record some acoustic guitars and do additional overdubs, and to record backing vocals with a couple of different people and record choirs, so that we don't just have one guy doing like 100 backing tracks, because we'll always just sound like one guy, right? So when we get different voices in there, and it actually went quite smooth. But sometimes in terms of the harmonies, we had to change some of the arrangements, in like some of the vocal arrangements in the choruses, and sometimes they wouldn't fit anymore with the keyboard arrangements that I had already written on those parts. So what happened was, while I was already in Sweden, we were like in the end production phase of the album, I contacted Jimmy and had him actually resample or replay a couple of the parts that didn't work so well anymore with the vocal arrangements. But I mean, I worked with Per Nielsen, who has such great ears and such a good producer, that he even makes those more difficult and tricky tasks appear really easy and relaxed. So in general, I would say it was a quite smooth process, but it took a long time, because it happened over a very long period of time until all the musicians were together and all of that stuff. And the mix was more complex than it is for some of the tech test stuff I did, or some of the instrumental stuff I did, because of course when you have choirs of sometimes 100, 200, 300 vocal tracks, and then you have keyboards going on and 4 rhythm guitars and all that stuff, it's quite tricky to make a good mix where everything cuts through, and which is not just a compromise. And I think I did a really, really great job with it, but it took a lot longer did, for example, to mix the Beyond the Wall of Sleep album.
Yeah. So won't you do any release party or perform any show now or then?
Yeah, well, we're actually planning that. We're working on that. So got a couple of offers for a little tour in Europe in the summer, hopefully. It's not set in stone yet, but we're working on that, and a couple of single shows lined up for southern Germany, maybe in the fall. Mm-hmm. I'm really trying to get on Prog Power 2017, and now some of the promoters, and they expressed some interest in us there, and I'm hoping to be able to set up a short Japan tour.
Yeah, that's nice.
Because that type of music we play is really well received in Japan. So we're actually working on that, and once the first shows are booked and set in stone, I think then we'll also book a release show, which will be an exclusive first show, where we just play the complete album, I think. So this is the project or the plan for now, to get the band on the stage here.
Yeah, so what about Alkaloid? You played in Complexity Fest recently. How did it go?
It went very well. The thing with Alkaloid is also that the shows that we do, they are quite exclusive, so we only do shows every now and then. So the last show that we had played was in Egypt, back in September.
Yeah.
The next show was in March in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't play that difficult material for almost 6 months, then you have to really sit down and get prepared again for a couple of weeks to be able to play the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the gig went really well, went really smooth. It was well visited, good turnout, and I think we played quite well, even though there were a couple of technical problems because we didn't have our own sound guy, which is with that kind of music, which is so detailed.
Yeah.
Always a little bit tricky, but I'm really happy with how the show went. And I saw a couple of videos, and I think we sounded pretty good.
Oh, that's nice.
And people really liked it, and they were really into it. And considering that Alkaloid shows are always like a one-off event, right? You always have to get newly prepared. This went really well. It's a different thing, we're on tour. When you're on tour and you play 30 shows in a row and you play every night, you get more accustomed to everything,
yeah.
and the interplay becomes better. And so basically what we did, everyone practiced their asses off at home, and then we met in the Netherlands just like 2 days before, rehearsed for 2 days, and then we played the show. And considering the circumstances and the complexity of the music, I think the show went really, really well.
That's nice. So are you working on a new album?
Yeah, we're working on a new album. We're collecting ideas, which always goes really quick. Like in Alkaloid, we rather don't have the problem that we don't have enough material, but we rather have the problem that we have too much material, because we're 5 people and all of us, right? But at the end, we have to figure out like what's the overall direction of the album going to be, which ideas fit best, which songs are we going to use, which songs are we not going to use, So we're in that process right now, but it's still going to take a little until everything falls into place. So the idea is now, I'm hoping that this works out, that we start recording the album. Summer's maybe a little bit too early, but maybe in the fall or winter this year that we start recording. It's like it will definitely happen.
That's nice. So since you've been involved in a lot of bands and projects, how hard is to retain self-consciousness while writing music and make a clear distinction between playing and overplaying things?
This is a really good question. I have to say, in terms of writing and writing albums, I really haven't faced that problem yet, because I'm doing so many different styles, right? I've been doing a lot of different things. I have my solo records, I have the stuff I did with Obscura, stuff I do with Alkaloid, and my new power metal band is totally different from that. So it's, as long as it's always fresh and exciting, it's quite easy to come up with good ideas and to come up with fresh sounding things, right? Even Alkaloid is a little bit different from what we did in Obscura, for example. And as long as you always challenge yourself to do something new, you don't really face the problem of repeating yourself too much. Where I actually do face a problem sometimes is recently, I'm doing a lot of session work. I mean, I do a lot of guest solo recording.
Yeah.
I don't know, I think I did like 60 or 70 guest solos in the last couple of years, and I've recorded so many solos and been a guest on so many tracks for so many bands, and played so many solos in all the albums of the bands that I'm in and my solo stuff. Yeah. And there, I have to admit, it's sometimes quite tricky not to repeat myself too much, right? Especially when I do the guest soloing thing.
Yeah. And
often it's tech-less bands, and it's not too different from stuff I did in Obscura and Necrophagist. And then I sometimes have the problem that I record something that I would probably have liked 2 or 3 years ago and would have used, but then I think, I hurt myself play it so much, and I feel like I'm repeating myself too much here, and I'm getting a little bit tired of my own style, especially when it comes to solo playing, especially in the tech death kind of context, because it's always the same song speed, it's always very similar rhythm parts I play over, and this basically forces me to learn and try new things, right? Check out new players who use maybe some different techniques or harmonic concepts that I haven't used yet, even though it's not anymore like when I was 16 or 18 where I would like sit down and transcribe stuff all day and study different players, but I really have to do that, because otherwise I don't want to just rehash the same old licks like 50 times, and I mean, and the difficulty is to sound like yourself but still bring new elements every now and then. I mean, sometimes it's quite the opposite, and it works quite easy, because when I do guest stars, sometimes the stuff I play over is quite different from what I play over in my own stuff, and then it triggers and challenges a new way of thinking, right? But if it's very similar to something I recorded so many times before, then it becomes, the more you do it, especially in recent years, becomes harder for me to remain creative with it and come up with new stuff, right? So what I'm trying to do is study players, not necessarily from a metal context, right? But I mean, I study some techniques that, for example, country guitar players use, right? Like the hybrid picking stuff, the finger picking stuff, and then see, okay, how can I combine it with the note choices and my style that I use in the death metal sounding, or I maybe transcribe some lines by jazz players, not necessarily guitar players, but more like one player, saxophone players who think totally differently than guitar players do, and then try to think of ways how I could play it on guitar and incorporate it into a different style of music, and this remains a challenge and is becoming trickier the more often you do it. That's definitely a fact.
That's nice. So that's it. Anything you would like to add?
No, I want to say thank you for the support you've given for the album so far and for playing it regularly on your show. And thank you to all the people who checked it out and recommended it and spread the word. I really appreciate it, and I hope that the people who have not heard it yet, that they will give it a chance. Just check it out if they dig it or not. And I just say thank you from the bottom of my heart.
No problem.